Hi, this is Geeta Modi and you're watching Shot with Big Shot. So in my quest for success stories and unique success stories in Surat, I came across this young gentleman who hails from Surat after completing his studies in Delhi and finally going on to become an IIT engineer. He ranked in all his IIT exams as a first class ranker and finally achieved like the holy grail of jobs which every IITian wants, and that is a job at Google in their newly opened office in Bangalore. Armed with that experience, he came back to Mumbai and with some friends, they started a movement called the Swasth Bharat movement, which was supplying healthcare to the poor in India. This was one of the first VC investments by Ratan Tata. Finally, he is back in Surat, joined his family business, the Triveni Saris, and now developed an app called Wishbook. Let's know more about Wishbook from Mr. Arvind Saraf. Welcome, Arvind, to Shot with Big Shot.
Thank you, Geeta ji. Thank you for having me on the show.
Really, you got this time from your busy schedule. We are so happy to have you here.
Not that busy as you think.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So, Arvind, first only tell us about Wishbook.
The apparel industry in India obviously is large but highly fragmented. So you have places like Surat, where we are all from, which make saris, garments of a certain type. But they make the product, they sell to wholesalers sell to retailer.
True.
Now, just the sheer magnitude of this industry, there are at least 30 lakh retailers in India dealing in apparels. There's severe information gaps that exist. The manufacturers sitting in Surat, and there are at least 20,000 of such manufacturers,
yes, of course,
have no visibility on what's happening in retail, and the kind of decisions that they're able to make is severely impaired by the visibility. Our goal is, can we take a manufacturer sitting in Surat or a wholesaler in Kalbadevi in Mumbai or a small retailer and give him the efficiency that an organized large brand like Zara would have. And for that, we have built an app, a mobile app, by which a manufacturer or a wholesaler can manage his existing sales, or new retailers can discover new suppliers as well. And by doing so, sort of capture all of his transactions on a single platform, things which are very, very fragmented and unorganized.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So you think it has grown, the app, since the
also,
time?
We've seen a massive, fast growth. So we've been growing 20% month on month. Last 1 year, we have seen 10 times the adoption. We already have 1 lakh plus retailers using it.
Wonderful.
We have easily the top brands from Surat and Ahmedabad selling on the application, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. We expect a lot more growth we have only sort of covered a small fraction of the entire industry right now, and a lot more to be done in the next months and years.
Wonderful. So how did this journey all begin? I mean, what led you to
Right. So as you mentioned, you talked about, and thanks for the glowing introduction. You talked about my journey. I've always been a very academic sort of person throughout, but my educational exposure as a student in the US at MIT gave me a lot more perspective on using technology for solving emerging market problems. So while I was doing a lot of cutting edge technology work at MIT, there were groups on campus which had started looking at using technology to solve developing world problems, and that hooked me because I'd grown up in India. I had some exposure to the problems, and that made me come back to India. Initially with Google to work on some of those solutions before starting my entrepreneurial journey. So my family is from Surat. They run a sari brand, as you mentioned, in Surat. And through them, whenever I traveled home, visited my family, through their perspective, I could see the challenges that the industry faced. And this was not just them, but it was representative of the challenges in the entire industry. And somewhere I felt that perhaps while we looked at solving bringing efficiency in the corporate sector, can we sort of bring in those learnings into the apparel sector? And that was the early journey into Wishbook. Before that, I spent about 4 years as part of Triveni Saris. So imagine doing cutting edge research at MIT to actually selling saris. That's the kind of journey that it's been so far.
But you think like the elders who are already stuck with the older systems, are they receptive to these new ideas and they want this to happen?
Well, I've seen so I've been back in Surat for about 7 years, and I've seen a strong evolution happen of people in terms of reception to technology and ideas. So 7-8 years ago, if you ask me, perhaps there was a lot of resistance. But last few years, people have started using technology. The most common technology that you use day long is mobile phone. So everybody has a smartphone. Everybody uses a few apps. The younger generation is coming back to Surat.
Yes.
The younger generation comes with a little more exposure, with a lot more exposure, in fact, of corporate world, the corporate efficiency. They understand that businesses, the way it was done now, needs to change. So I think the openness towards innovation, bringing in technology, is there now. Obviously, there's still a lot more that has to happen there, but I don't think businesses have any choice anymore. Either they must upgrade, they must sort of become more efficient, or else there is enough competition from international manufacturers, from the large brands, that can question their existence, that can challenge their existence at all. That's where the situation is.
So you think that technology helps us, or are we becoming too dependent upon it?
So I think it's also how it's like technology has always been a double-edged sword, right? So it depends on how we use technology. So we understand that businesses require complete visibility on what's happening, and without connectivity that technology offers, you can't do that.
Right.
But I think a lot of our users of technology has been to do things which perhaps we are better off doing ourselves. If you use technology as a tool to sort of while away time, to sort of substitute for skills that one should develop, I don't think technology is a replacement for our own analytical skills, for our own sort of social skills or social activities. But I think perhaps the focus that we have done with technology on the latter, I think, should shift to more
so we should make it more use it more for productivity rather than just.
But I think it's the reality is technology is there. It's going to be there. It's going to be. I mean, the adoption is going to increase. I think it's a future, right? So we just have to sort of make the right use of it. And perhaps sectors like Surat, businesses like those in Surat, we haven't used it optimally yet. There is a lot more to be done there, which is where we are trying to do a small intervention right now.
So now after you made Wishbook, do you think you would require some other supporting apps, or you need to develop something else, or this is it, like, you know?
So I think we play in the complete ecosystem of the apparel industry. So obviously the existing manufacturers exist, but we leverage a lot of other technologies, people that exist. So we work closely with, for example, financial institutions, because we understand that these businesses heavily work on credit, and there are companies which are purely focused on credit and financing. We use a lot of machine learning data, which are standard existing sort of solutions or libraries or plug and play tools essentially. So we do cross leverage a lot of other tools, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? There's so much to be done that if there are parts of it that people have done and done it well, you're better off using it as a small lean team. You want to sort of rationalize the resources that you spend on
so you would have more things developed on Wishbook itself rather than other.
And we also built upon a lot of other things that others have developed as well.
Okay.
Right. But I think the sheer power of bringing people on a platform,
on one platform, is important.
It's important. Once you get them onto platform, yes, a lot more things can be done, right? So you start suggesting manufacturers what they should make. You start suggesting them what is not moving. You help them analyze their numbers a lot better. The sheer things.
But the upgradation of your app would continue.
Yes, it continues. So I think technology, if there's one thing which has been true throughout, is that it's never stagnant. It has to. You can't.
It's scalable. It keeps on scaling.
Yes, you have to constantly upgrade, build upon it, because if you don't, somebody else might do that and take it all away from you.
So you think that education, not only in India, but if people go abroad, if they travel, when they get into international circuits, and that time, that sort of an education is much more helpful to them once they come back here, or it's okay to just, be in the city and get whatever you have?
I think exposure is tremendously useful. I've seen how it has impacted me, from somebody who stayed away from businesses to somebody who has come back to realizing the value of. It took me some time as a student in the US to come to respect the businesses that happen in Surat.
So you sort of made a business out of a business. You had a business and then you made another business from it.
Right, and we're trying to sort of use that business to make the other businesses better. Yeah. But exposure is where you learn what's the cutting edge, right? Yeah. Where do we aspire to? Surat is a great entrepreneurial ecosystem, but there is still a lot to be learned from more corporate large setup, not everything is necessary to be
Available
learned, but
here.
exposure. True, not everything is available here, but thankfully a lot of talent is there now. A lot of talent is
Yes.
coming back, and if they come back with the right exposure, they will bring a lot of it into their existing businesses. So exposure, I is tremendously. I do recommend anybody sitting in Surat to at least spend a couple of years outside, be it as a student or more, even better, working outside in a large setup to see how things scale, how you can build and grow things beyond the current Surat scale.
Because now we have a lot of startups coming up in Surat, and I think a lot from the textile industry as well.
True.
So I think they require this knowledge more than anything else now.
Sure. You could learn from outside and then try and apply it back to the setup, right? So this Surat obviously has a lot of industries, but perhaps learnings from outside could come back, and they could come back and apply, which is sort of what we're trying to do as well.
So were there any really strong challenges which you had to, combat when you went this way? Maybe from your family they said, no, don't do this, and maybe from other textile people or the peers around who said, no, this won't work.
So I think there were challenges at personal and professional level both. Personally, obviously, having lived a certain life in the US or having lived a certain life in the large corporate setup, coming back and fitting into a traditional textile industry, you're working with a
very professional one as well, right?
Yes, and a very different set of people altogether. You cannot have the Google kind of or a MIT kind of conversations in those setups. So yes, but then when you are sort of clear about the reasons you're taking up those challenges, those things are smaller roadblocks. But I think the conviction about what you want to do, what the world view would be, and not necessarily next year, but 5-10 years down the line is very, very important.
That vision is
important, as well as the humility to accept and realize that, look, maybe this is what I think it would be, but perhaps the road is not here, but maybe here.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge that most of us as entrepreneurs often face. We so strongly believe in a certain worldview that something happens when we're doing it, which suggests that we should maybe change our direction a little bit, the way to get there.
Detour,
We face those ego issues ourselves. Nahi, agar mera strong conviction hai that it should be that way, why should I change it now? Am I becoming too fickle with the conviction? And that humility is something that I've learned from these challenges as well.
Wow, wonderful.
I mean, I think perhaps I should be a lot more humble than I am, but yes, but I'm getting there right now.
But I think everybody, once they reach the top, they become more and more humble.
Which top are you talking about? I'm still at the bottom right now.
No, but it's still, you're on the way.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, moving on, we are just going to come on and play a small sort of a game. It's not a game, it's something called Scrapbook. So it's like a one-liner.
Sure.
Just a simple thing for fun. Fave destination.
So I've always liked a lot of places with a lot of history. So Istanbul is a place that I've been wanting to go yet to and haven't been there.
Politician you admire?
So there was a time when I was in early 20s, I was kind of idealistic. So somebody like Pandit Nehru I admired especially was inspired a lot by the way he had international education and still sort of came back to India and wanted to discover India. His discovery of India was one of my books that somewhere made an impact and had me come back to India.
You. Okay, wonderful. An entrepreneur you admire?
There's some people who have had amazing visions to even think about space research. So founders of Tesla or even Uber, Travis Kalanick. These are people who have had vision to think way beyond that than what we have done so far. Yeah.
Right. Any writer you love?
There's a book by Nobel laureate Hermann Hesse. He wrote this amazing book known as Siddhartha, a German guy writing about not Gautam Buddha, but a character inspired by him.
Any hidden talent that you have?
I like writing. I don't get around to doing it as much. I've dined a little bit in the past as well, but I find writing a little cathartic. It helps me get things out of my mind, but I should be doing a little more of that.
Writing your own biography?
Too far from that. Maybe just small snippets, small learnings perhaps, or even just random banter at times as well.
So if a movie was to be made on you, who would you like to play your character?
I would imagine it should not be a star. It should be a regular, maybe somebody who's sort of a next door person perhaps, because I think
into movies.
No, I am into movies. I can't think of a star playing me somehow, because perhaps somebody who's a lot more who's a new person and then the introduction to the people don't.
Okay, a new actor.
A new actor. Perhaps people don't view him with a certain lens when they.
Okay. So he would be just you, and they would not go back to all the characters he's
that
played
he has
before.
played so far.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Arvindji, you said you came back to the city, not only our country but our small city Surat, and you started working in your own traditional family business. What would be your advice to the youngsters?
I see a lot of youngsters wanting to do something new, something more entrepreneurial, which is great. A few things that I have learned from my experience. So one is always be very grounded. So I think we talked about my journey at Google, but
True.
I think we often forget that Google started in garage. I think the kind of frugality that the early team or engineers built at Google is what helped it through in addition to the culture of innovation that they built in.
Right.
So always be grounded. If you're working on a specific problem, go into the depth of it, spend enough time with it, respect what's being done before you can think about improving it. I talked about humility to sort of accept at points where you may not have been necessarily right. Hard work, perseverance, obviously we all talk about, it's a no-brainer that goes there. Understand the problem that you're trying to solve. Learn to work with people mostly.
True.
But spend enough time with the problem that you're trying to solve before you can solve it. Yeah.
Right. It was really wonderful talking to you. We got such an insight into your work. I'm sure the youngsters must be so inspired. Thank you so much for coming here. And just because you have removed so much time and given us such wonderful interview, we would like to appreciate it with a little token.
Wow, thank you. Thank you.
I hope you remember us. We have this little mug with your picture on it.
Oh wow.
So every time you have your coffee, think of Shot with Big Shot.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So we met Mr. Arvind Saraf and had this lovely conversation with him. And if you're into textiles, you must download Wishbook and start using it instantly. And the takeaway from today is stay grounded. Spend a lot of time with your problems. Don't run away from them. Get to know them more and more so you can solve them better. Until next time, take care, be fit.